I always try to be as honest as possible with who I am and the way I want to express myself.
Hi there, everybody. Here is Mario. Welcome to another episode of Design Interview 10 Questions, where we interview designers and design experts from all around the world. Today's guest is Olimpia Zagnoli. She's a graphic designer and illustrator from Italy, Milan. So, welcome, Olimpia. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Mario. Thank you for having me.
So, if you don't mind, I would start with the initial question, which is what made you become a designer?
Well, I've always had a really deep love for visual communication in general, meaning that when I was a kid, obviously I loved drawing and express myself through drawings and sketching and collaging and using the visual form as a way of communicating more than words, more than other gestures of, I would say, affection or very open gestures. I would draw and write a lot when I was a kid. And then I kept doing it basically. And when I was about 19, 20, I had the chance to pick a school that would, in a way, be a great territory to sort of protect this this way of seeing the world that I had. And at the time, I found a school here in Milan that gave me some sort of basic teachings in drawing and design, very basic. And then after that, I kind of realized that what I like to do could potentially become a job, and so I kind of followed pretty much what I thought made sense in order to kind of shape this passion of mine into a profession.
And do you define yourself more as a graphic designer or an illustrator?
No, I don't consider myself a graphic designer because I have absolutely no graphic design training at all. So I don't know much about typography. I don't know much about grids and how to move myself on a page, for example. So I've started straightly with drawing. Like my way of moving around the page is through drawings. So I like to work with graphic designers because their work sort of contains mine and or walks hand in hand with mine. So I would say I'm an illustrator, yes, much more than a graphic designer.
And what is then illustration for you?
For me, as I said, it's a way of communicating through images. So illustration can help you communicate a concept, a brief, the content of a novel, the content of a manifesto, whatever it is. In a way, it's a simplified version, simplified way of communicating through images.
And I mean, your style, it's very particular, like for any illustrator, of course, but what do you try to create with your illustrations? Are I don't know, for example, we interviewed Marion Duchard, and for her was like to illustrate something that was happening in her lives, like her kids or dogs or friends, Is the same for you, or you move in a different way?
Well, it's hard to say. I don't necessarily look for something specific to depict or to inspire me. It's more like trying to follow maybe a feeling that I feel at the moment. It's not really a matter of if it's in a if it's an assignment from a client, for example, or if it's something that I want to do on my own, or if it's an album cover, or I don't know, a book cover. I feel like what I'm trying to chase is more like of a sense of what's in this text, in this landscape around me, in this book, and try to communicate that sort of like feeling in a way. And through the sensations that I get, I hope I'm able to communicate to others what I'm feeling and what I felt after reading the book, for example.
And the style that you usually use in your illustrations is something that you built in the time you worked on it, or is something really like natural that you always had in your hands?
Well, obviously, it's my language. It's a part of a process. So I never thought like initially, oh, I'm gonna find a style and then I'm gonna be in that style. I'm gonna stay there and use that language forever. Um, I always try to be as honest as possible with who I am and the way I want to express myself. So obviously, in the beginning, I wasn't able to do so easily because there was sort of a gap between what I felt inside and what I saw on the paper, on the page. Um, I couldn't really recognize myself in what I was doing. And those were experiments, obviously. So I'm not saying that I didn't like them. They were just like the beginning of me sort of like creating a dialogue with myself and with the things that I wanted to say. And then the more I practiced, the more I started drawing every day, for example, the more these shapes and these colors sort of like came to life. And the more they started, the more I started uh, producing more illustrations, more drawings, the more I would recognize myself in those shapes, in those colors. Um, Therefore, I felt a bit more connected and much less of a gap, as I said before. But it's still a work in progress. Like I don't see my works now, and I'm like, oh, this is my style, so I'm just gonna keep staying here and not, you know, uh, and not look for other ways to express myself because obviously we change every day. Each one of us changes every day a little bit. So um, even the work and the style, if you want to call it like that, is always like trying to evolve. And even if it's just like an inch every day, a centimeter every day, that maybe people outside don't even notice, there is a movement, like a constant movement anyway.
And you mentioned the process before, and how does it work when you illustrate or draw a new project? Like you start with a structure, with a sketch, and then after you play with the colors, or is it something that goes together all the time?
Well, it really depends. It depends on the kind of assignment. It depends on the surface, like where the illustration is going to go. It depends on the timing, like if I have a really, really short time to deliver a final piece or if I have more time. So it really depends. But generally speaking, for me, it's really still very important to sketch on a sketchbook, like with a pen, with a pencil, whatever I have around and try to build my idea of what I want to represent on paper. I feel like it's a bit more instinctive. It goes a little bit faster. I think the actual like act of drawing on paper, it's a bit faster and more a bit more connected to what you're thinking at the moment, literally more connected to the brain than, taking a tablet and switching it on and having to draw on it. I feel like it's a little bit more direct. So that is a part that I still love to do, and I try to do it as much as I can. And then, once I have a couple sketches, I usually discuss these sketches with an art director or whoever is on the other side of the phone. And then from there, usually I go straight on the computer and I translate that initial idea or that concept on the computer, and it's there where I make the final piece most of the time.
And is that like the sketching part the most interesting part of the process for you, or also like playing with colors and to see the outcome? I don't know, maybe the printing as well.
Um, I feel like all phases are pretty interesting. I like to be surprised. Like, for example, sometimes I'm on the phone with, let's say, a client, if it's a professional commission. Sometimes I'm on the phone with the client and I'm talking to him or to her, and they're expressing their ideas. Um, and I sometimes would sketch while on the phone, and some projects have come out to be, I mean, I then go through the usual process, but then sometimes I realize that the first idea that I got like quite instinctively on the phone was sort of like a glimpse of what the final work would be. And so those moments are happen like not all the time, unfortunately, but sometimes they do happen. And I like this sort of like ability of the brain, not because it's my brain, but in general, I think the brain has obviously so many resources, and sometimes it surprises you because you've been like sort of like piling up all these inspirations, all these images, all these, books you've read, all these images from what you saw around you, and you've been kind of like saving them. And then all of a sudden, while you're on the phone and your brain is busy doing something else, like replying to a client, it would go and like on its own and sort of like give you a solution right away, or give you like a sort of like um, yeah, sort of like a firework where you're like, oh, this is interesting, or this came out somehow from my brain. So that part I find it very interesting sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes it's a pain to find an idea, obviously. I also like, as you said, the final part. Sometimes I like to see a drawing, especially if it's created on the computer. I really enjoy seeing it out in the world, meaning printed on some material that I never worked on before, for example. Meaning, I don't know, for example, in the past, I worked with textile. And so having your work printed on silk, for example, gives it a completely new dimension. You see your work in new colors. You kind of like let your work move with the fabric, for example. So you see new sides, sort of like a 3D dimension of your own work that you usually don't see if you don't do something like that, like printing on different surfaces or stuff, or something like, for example, that something like making a job like that, like a work that's very small in size, and then seeing it like printed or painted on a bigger space, for example, on a wall, is it's really interesting because you discover a lot of things about your work that you never thought before.
And do you need a specific state of mind while you are drawing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I work from every day, so it would be very difficult to wait for a specific state of mind to work. So I just work, and I'm usually quite a positive person, as much as I can. So I don't enjoy particularly creating from suffering or from sadness or from pain. I try to keep quite positive. So usually my work is born in an environment that's quite happy.
And we said before that illustrations, I mean, are really subjective in some way because I mean everyone has his own or her style, and But do you think perfection exists?
No, absolutely not. There's no perfection, and that's the beauty of it, I think. As I said before, everything that's in the visual communication field, whether it's a portrait or a picture or an oil painting or an illustration, I feel like they're in a way their beauty is exactly the fact that it's not perfect, and so it represents the effort of the creator behind it to chase something, to look for something, to, as I said, be in a constant state of a work in progress. So not having found the answers yet. So I feel like this sort of like instability of the inventors, the creators, the artists behind a piece are actually the main, the most important aspects of the work.
In the previous generations, like being a graphic designer, a designer in general, also an illustrator, I mean, was not so important in the society, especially in Italy, where we are from. But today is changing a bit. So also, for example, with online content and so on, and what's your opinion about that? About like, for example, the contemporary scene of illustrator?
Well, I feel like visual communication has its trends. For example, like illustration was really used in the 80s. It was really used in the 60s as well, even in the 20s and the 30s. So um, obviously there have been moments in time where photography, for example, was more powerful than illustration. But these things like come and go. So when I first started, for example, illustration wasn't really a big deal at the moment. It was in a sort of like quiet state, quiet moment, and there was something else. Now it's a really good moment, I feel, for illustration, not only in Europe but everywhere in the world. Probably in our country, Italy. More and more people have been attracted by the potential of illustration quite recently. But that doesn't mean that it's gonna stay that way. It will probably still like go up and down, like it's always been. What I feel like is particularly descriptive of European design and European illustration, European art. Obviously, it's such a big, wide world that it's very difficult to define. But I feel like we are, even if we don't want to admit it, or even if we haven't studied it, we are obviously influenced by the culture of this country, of this continent. And everyone has been inside a church, everyone has walked in front of a masterpiece. Everyone has seen like the quality of, the way shoes are made by an artisan, or touched a beautiful silk gown made by a seamstress, in our culture. In our culture. So I feel like we are exposed to beautiful things, well designed objects, well designed dresses, well designed architecture. So that's definitely something that, if we are visual communicators, we cannot forget, because it's in our blood, it's in our bones. So obviously you can do beautiful things out of this heritage, or terrible things out of this heritage, but we all share it, I think, in a way or the other. um, and you can see it in the work of European artists. I think there are traces of this heritage.
And what do you think is said about the impact that internet had on design, visual communication, illustration?
Well, it's hard to define, the kind of like the boundaries of this impact, because it's been so huge and so powerful that obviously it's hard to like, point a finger to one aspect or the other. But I feel like, for me at least, like in my experience, internet and social media have, in a way, exposed me to many things that I wasn't in contact with. For example, again, I was really in contact with European art and architecture, but I wasn't so much exposed to, for example, Asian visual design or American TV shows or whatever. So internet has sort of like shortened these distances and opened up, the world to itself. It made everyone discover new things from other sides of the planet, which I find very fascinating and beautiful in a way. It has also, kind of like helped us as people who live in countries like Italy, for example, that's not typically really exposed to uh, some other countries, some other places. Internet has given us the opportunity to obviously share our work, our vision with so many other peoples that wouldn't have been, in touch with it, obviously. Personally, I've been always attracted by the internet, which is a wide concept, obviously. So what I can say is that I've always been interested in, going around the internet and trying to look for things. Even in like the, late 90s, I would, go online and look for what was there, trying to kind of like collect little things here and there from all kind of different sources. And I feel like this idea of like grasping things from different fields, from different places. It's kind of like the contemporary character like of these times. Like it's a behavior that everyone does now. It's not just like one way. I read this book, so I'm going to write in this way. I, was exposed to, I don't know, French literature, or so I'm gonna go in that direction. Now everyone sort of like takes things from everywhere, and therefore I feel like the cultural background of everyone has become wider than before. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe more people is exposed to more culture than before. It's a matter of a personal choice whether you want to be interested in it or make researches or not. It depends on who you are and how curious you are. But I have nothing but good words for the internet. Obviously, as everything, it can degenerate and it can create monsters, um, which it did, obviously. But I feel like our world has benefited so much from the internet and social media.
You said before that more and more people today are starting to be illustrators, also because they are believing that it could be a possible career in these days. And how do you see like the education in the field of illustration?
Well, I can't really tell you because I did a 3 years course in illustration and animation here in Milan, but that was, I feel like I graduated in 2006 or 2007. I feel like I might have graduated in 2006. I'm not sure, but so I haven't been really in contact with the educational programs offered by Italy, for example, by Europe and or the US. Like I know people that teaches regularly, I know that some schools are more, famous than others for their programs, and that they have exceptional teachers. But I wouldn't know exactly what's the state of the art right now for illustration and teaching in general. What I feel like is that it's great to have schools and courses and classes that expose you to what really is the profession of an illustrator, for example, in my case. But at the same time, I feel like we shouldn't forget that inspiration and talent, is born from, as I said before, from a lot of different sources. So what I hope is that people nowadays, and kids going to school, and young adults attending this sort of like classes, I really hope that they are exposed to more than just illustration, more than just like assignments that are professionally designed to make you become an illustrator.
Today, especially in this moment, I mean, we are seeing like illustrators and graphic designer, I mean, in general, designers um, are taking really their own space in the society. So also the role of the designer or illustrator is changing. So what kind of role for you the designer will have in the future?
Well, I don't know. I feel like designers always I'm thinking, for example, about product designer or interior designers or architects. Um, I feel like they've always had to confront themselves with the reality outside, with the world we live in, and question themselves, about the quality of what they were doing, because people have to, no matter what, people have to live with the objects they created, with the spaces they created, with the gardens they created. So I feel like the role of a designer or of an artist is to question the reality outside of your window. And it's always been like that. And nowadays, I feel like this should be the problem for designers, like to ask yourself some questions about why are you creating, what are you creating, and where the things you create go, like where do they go to live, where do they go to die, and and question yourself about the responsibility of what you're doing. But I don't think that has changed a lot. I think now we have obviously some kind of like urgencies that are more urgent than before. I'm talking obviously about um, the climate, the health issues outside, and the general condition of the human beings. But I feel that every generation had their own, problems and issues. So as artists and designers, we have to be the ones whose antennas, are always like working and sort of like detecting what's going on in the world and what we can do about it.
And I mean, we arrived to the last question, which is more into like the topic of this global pandemic that we are unfortunately facing in these days. And we can see, for example, I mean, this one like design interview, but also there are so many, I think, great initiative, also application for designs, illustration, and so on online. And do you think has a designers or illustrator, I mean, in the field of communication, we can help somehow in this global pandemic?
Sure, I think that there are many ways to contribute, and it's all right to do what you feel like. As a designer, I feel it's all right to do whatever you feel like it's honest with your vision. Um, it's great to, for example, to in my field, it's great to, you know, work on artworks that are going to be printed, and then the prints are going to be sold and the money will be given to charity, for example. But it's also great to, you know, work on a piece that can be donated for a good cause. Or it could be great to do, like, for example, information design, like creating a poster that explains how to do things now that everything seems so confused. And you know, people, not all the people have access to education, so images are really, really important, I think, to convey a message right now, for example. And also, I think in your everyday practice, like cultivating your ability to question yourself, to question the world, to you know, criticize if there's any need to criticize, and, you know, being radical in your choices. I feel like it's a job that you can do in your own studio without showing, without, you know, showing your work to anybody. But that process of, you know, trying to become a more aware human being is helping the world anyway, in the same way as, you know, people meditating and people you know, spending time to cultivate their good thoughts are helping the world. Even if they're stuck in their room, they're doing their own, you know, work anyway. So I feel like there are many, many ways to contribute.
Well, thank you very much, Olympia. Thanks for being
Thank you.
with us.